Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get things started now. Thank you very much for coming out this morning for this, our latest presentation, WMS Pro Tips. How many of you were here at or not here, but how many were at the last presentation? Just a show of hands. Pretty good, pretty good. This is a great crowd. There are a lot of new faces, so obviously people are interested in the subjects that we're presenting. Just before we start, I wanted to draw your attention to the handouts that are on your seats. You may have noticed there's a toothbrush, there's a brochure, and there's a handout for this presentation. Well, just to explain, the toothbrush is part of an awareness campaign that McGill IT Services has been doing in conjunction with the Faculty of Dentistry, so there's a tie-in there. And it's to raise awareness about online security. And we encourage you to read the information there, to take those tips away. Follow the links that are provided in the brochure, because they will come in very handy. So to get right down to what we're here about today, we want to talk about one topic in particular, but we have two themes going on. First off, we want to talk about the community and how it's working together, implementing ideas, using tools from the tool set, and sharing ideas and getting the most, because every area, every unit has its own goals and objectives, and we're finding interesting ways that people are addressing their needs by using the tools, and we're going to show you some of those this morning. One of the other topics we're going to address, and this is the main event, every time we do a survey after the end of one of these presentations, we ask our audience what they're interested in hearing about in the future. And an overwhelming number of people have asked for a presentation on web forms. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And we're going to be talking about some exciting new features, tips for optimizing your web forms, and of course, how to avoid some common security pitfalls. A lot of you know that we release new functionality and we release enhancements to existing functionality on a fairly regular basis. It's come to our attention recently that the WMS is the #1 cause of new knowledge-based articles being written. And because we're changing things up, we know that we need to bring your focus and your attention to how the new tools work. So we do presentations like this, and we're writing KB articles and other forms of communication largely to create awareness about what we're doing so that you will get the best out of the tools that we're working on. And one of the ways that we're doing this is through a new instrument that we're calling the WMS Digest. How many of you received this in your email box already? Wow. Okay. I'm glad I'm drawing attention to it. Look for this. This is the new look, by the way. Previously, we were simply referring to it as news and announcements about the WMS. But look for the WMS Digest because it contains a lot of interesting information about how the community is using the tools, what new tools are available for use, and we draw attention to some key websites that are doing some interesting or innovative things. The most popular part, and we're monitoring this, we're watching how the articles are being read. What is most popular turns out to be how the community is actually working. So this is an interesting trend that's taking place. I think people are looking at their neighbors to see how they're using the tool set. And we really want to show and draw attention to how other people are using the tools that we're creating in the real world, because that's where they really come to life. And we see across the campus that there's a desire to create better websites that address audience needs. We're seeing something else happening right now, and that is a kind of coordination of efforts. And in some areas, people are learning from each other and sharing tips. They're working on harmonizing their layouts and strategies for publishing. Website admins and managers are starting to share best practices. And one of those examples is the Faculty of Engineering. For those of you who were at our previous presentations, you may recall that we mentioned that the Faculty of Engineering was engaging in focus groups and usability tests. And they were trying to learn how their users were really interacting with their websites and why they were coming to their websites in the first place. So Faculty of Engineering took the lessons they learned, they used the data that they were able to extract from these tests, and they modified their website. Fortunately, they weren't just content to stop there. So they had the desire to use this information on a number of different websites, all belonging to the Faculty of Engineering. So all of the departments, institutes, and centers would then become more harmonized with what the faculty was attempting to do centrally. So taking this next step, they applied the lessons that they learned from the main faculty website, and they are in the process of applying these lessons to their other web properties. And I'm going to give a brief shout out here to Mike Cardillo, who has been leading this effort. He's been engaged by the Faculty of Engineering to help revamp their websites. And over the summer, he's begun a massive project of taking each of the departmental websites one by one and rebuilding it. And as you can see here from the three examples, chemical engineering, the electrical and computer engineering, and I believe civil, what is happening is that they're starting to use common themes. They're making their websites work together harmoniously. They're sharing information about upcoming events. But it's in the use of the tool set that I think it really shines, because they're making, they're establishing a look across all the faculty websites. And this was made possible by the work of Professor Mark Driscoll, who again was empowered by the faculty to bring together chairs and directors to help elevate their websites, to take a more strategic approach to how the information was being published. And it's because of this higher level of commitment to their websites that I think they're going to take this to the next level. Now, this is just the beginning, but we're very interested in watching this unfold, and I think you might be too. So as we learn more about how this works out, we'll be bringing that information back to you too, because I think we all have a lot to learn about this process. It could be applied, and we think very strongly that it could work in a number of different areas of the university, especially the larger faculties, but we're going to see. So we're going to be following their progress. We have a few things to cover today, and I'm not going to take much longer at this podium because we have to get right down to it. But we will be inviting our leading web form expert, Leanne Marquez, to talk to us about web forms. This is going to be a deep dive into the world of web forms, and we want you to pay particular attention because there will be pop quizzes along the way. And as a result of the pop quiz, or maybe I should say to get prepared for, use the handout, log in early. If you don't have an account set up, it takes only a few seconds to set up, but if you want to participate in this, it'll be through your mobile device, probably your phone, and you'll be able to participate in the polling, and it's a lot of fun. First, I'm going to invite two familiar faces, Jason Delmar and Joyce Peralta, and they're going to take a closer look and talk to you about how the community is using the tool set. And without any further ado, Jason.
Great, thanks, Carl. Good morning, everybody. There's been a lot of activity on the WMS. Joyce and I are enthused to show you the work that has been going on many of our sites. So to get right down to the bottom of it, we're going to start with the footer. This is the footer for Skills 21. This is a site that is the initiative of adding some new learning material to help students in the workforce. They've spent a lot of time taking a look at how students would navigate that site, and the site looks fantastic. If you have a chance, really suggest taking a look. But coming down to their footer, they have they've incorporated a graphic in the bottom, so they have this really nice logo. And on the columns here, the 3 columns, they've divided that up by audience. So they have 4 students, 4 partners. They also have a column for about the program, which is nice. It's very concise and clear. And they've also incorporated the social media at the bottom of their office information. Next, there's Trottier Institute for Sustainability in Engineering and Design. They also have a very beautiful logo. And this logo works very well in the footer. And how they've done that is they've used a transparent PNG, which allows the background of the footer to come through, so it looks seamless. They've also used the social media as well. And there's International Experience Awards. Now, the thing that's unique about this one is they've looked at adding a call to action. So they have a key item that they want their visitors to click on, and they probably have it in other pages. But as you scroll down to the page, this is the last chance to have someone click that action item. So they've applied it to the footer. All of these additions are available to everybody. If you go to site settings, your site admin can add a graphical image, a call to action into your footers.
Great. So the first feature that I'm going to get to present is the new enhanced call to action block. For those of you who attended our last presentation, you might remember us announcing this block. It was a brand new feature. And since then, we've seen quite a few people use them in the site. I believe the original request that came in was for this to be used as a donation option right on the page. So here is one example of an enhanced call to action block. It's for the Skills 21 site again. I want to give a shout out to the Skills 21 folks and the TLS folks who I see in the audience because it's the big launch party tonight. So we're looking forward to that. We've had the opportunity to work with a bunch of departments on campus. Engineering was one. Skills 21 was another one, and we had a great experience working with the team. Since we've worked with them, they've taken their site to the next level, I think, and one of the great things they've done is they've put a great enhanced call to action block on their homepage. So they have 500 students have already registered for Skills 21, want to join them. Registration reopens January 2018. And I think one of the really successful things about their call to action is they really have engaging text. It really entices the students to click. It's a sense of you can be involved in this initiative. And I also like that they're using different size fonts in their call to action block. For those of you who don't know how this block works, it stays in the top right-hand corner of the page as the visitor scrolls through. So it's really visible to your visitors as they're looking through your page. We wanted to show a couple of other examples. One is the Panama Field Study Semester. They have a really fun, and this kind of idea of using playful text in your call to action block is, I think, a really great thing. So there it says, discover what awaits you in Panama, sneak preview. Who wouldn't want to click there? I mean,
I want to go to Panama.
See what awaits me in Panama. So we also wanted to show an example of an enhanced call to action block that isn't in the enhanced region. Or in the highlighted region of the site. So if you put it in the highlighted region, it'll show up in the top right corner. You can also put it in other areas of your page. And this bottom right example is an example of it placed in the content area. You can put it in the top of page, bottom of page, top of content. And if you place it in these areas, it shows up as a full width block. So that's another option for this.
Next is Dashboard Confessionals. Does anyone know the band Dashboard Confessionals, by the way?
Yeah.
Yes, great. Okay, awesome. So Dashboard Confessionals, this relates to our dashboard tool in the site administration area. Ultimately, it gives you an overview of your site's health, letting you know which information needs to be translated, how many web submissions you're getting. But what we've heard from site admins or site managers that have a lot of content contributors on their site is that the dashboard users, or the user dashboard, is very helpful. So this dashboard basically lists out everyone that has authenticated into your site and what roles they have applied to them. So you'll know if a user has the ability, if the user has the ability to just edit content or create channels items, if they're a site manager. And what we've heard is that site managers would do this with an Excel document and they had to manually update it. So here, they don't have to do that anymore. You can use this view. There's a bunch of filtering options. And this was a benefit of a lot of feedback that we got from site managers. So thank you for that feedback. Now the entire community can benefit from these changes.
So put it on my tab. I think this is a song, right, and not a band?
Yes.
Jason came up with these great titles for these slides, by the way. So this is our section on the new vertical tab. And for those of you who might remember, before we had the vertical tab, we only had the horizontal tab as an option. And there were a lot of difficulties with working with the horizontal tab. There was a limit to the amount of space that you had, so you only could put in so many labels, and those labels had to be a short length so that you could fit all your tabs across. So now with the new horizontal tabs, or the new vertical tabs, sorry, we have the ability to place content in a vertical tab format. And I am really happy to be able to present this particular feature because usually when we release new features, I can envision how people are going to be implementing them. And with this one in particular, I was really impressed with the amount of creativity that people put into their implementations. I was really surprised and happy with people kind of took their vertical tab layouts to the next level. And this is an example of one of them. It's on the Dobson Cup demo days, which is the DASA Tells initiative. They have a page that has, for each of their vertical tabs for each of their demo days, which are located in various cities across the continent. So each page has, or each tab has a beautiful image that corresponds to the city where the event's being held. And underneath, they've placed the information related to that event in a vertical tab format. So it's an opportunity to create a nice compact layout that has all the information for people to easily peruse. And I think it's a really successful job that they did.
Yeah, when we saw this page, really, really excited of how it was being used. And the impact is definitely there. One of the things that we really liked is that they're providing impact in a very responsible fashion. So often, we've communicated that embedding text isn't good for accessibility for impaired visitors with screen readers. But what they've done here is that they've made sure to repeat that information within the vertical tab. So it's available, there's a lot of respect, and I think it's a responsible way to do it. So kudos.
So you don't need an image to make a vertical tab have impact. And here's an example of the vertical tabs on the Faculty of Arts homepage. And they've used it to organize links by audience group, which I think is another really successful implementation of this tool. They don't want to include all these links in a list on their homepage, and instead they've put them in a vertical tab format. And I think it's really great for them.
Yeah, and the other thing to note here is the use of the two-column layout within the vertical tab. So there's definitely a lot of creativity, and like a lot of the tools work together very nicely, and this is a good example of that.
And we have one more TLS example here to highlight for this vertical tab section. This is the skill sets, which is the grad studies, version of the Skills 21 program. This is on the new layout for the skill sets page, and they have used the vertical tabs to organize the different types of workshops that are available for grad students to take. And again, it provides this opportunity to have a compact layout that provides a lot of information in a very easy to navigate format. Yeah.
Great. All right, so current events. Just a quick audience poll. How many people create a lot of local events on their site? Okay. So this might be relevant. We've talked about this in a few other presentations, that there was a tool created for searching events. Primarily, the focus was on music, but we talked to many different site managers that were interested in events on their website. And we came up with this tool that has been, I think, on music for maybe a couple of years now, maybe a year and a half. So if you haven't seen this, the event tool basically shows you what's happening today, ongoing events, what's upcoming. It has a nice calendar view and a robust search tool for searching archived events and so forth. Now, what's really nice now is that other people have started to use this application. Days Hotel has started to use it, agriculture and environmental sciences, and also McGill libraries. This tool is available to everyone. You just have to get your site administrator to go into site settings. You'll see that there is a features tab, and you can enable channels event search. This works with the channels event system, with the channels news and events items. Sorry, the channels events. This works with channels events, so if you do have a lot of local events, this will be the thing for you.
So my hero, this is the last feature that we're going to present in this section of the presentation. This was another popularly requested tool. It's the hero block, which allows you to place a nice big image at the top of your pages that spans the whole window width of your browser. And that was something that was requested many times from site managers. A lot of people wanted to be able to put content on their sites that spans the full width, and that's the hero block if you want to put that on your site. So here's some example. Again, we're going to go back to the Faculty of Engineering because Mike's done some really great things with the hero blocks on the Faculty of Engineering site, some unique things we think that we'd like to draw your attention to. So one of the things that we really like, and we often go to these sites, by the way, and admire them because they have a really nice polished look to them. One of the things we really like is that a lot of the images provide context for what's on the page in terms of location or whatever is the focus of the page. That's what we see in the image, and there's a nice tie-in. We also like that there's often a filter that's put on the images depending on which department site it is, and the filters seem to create a sense of visual consistency throughout each particular site. So that's another nice touch that's put on these websites. Here's another example. Again, these images provide a super immersive experience because on the Days Hotels or the Schulich School of Music site, they're being used to highlight the different venues across campus. So they've had these beautiful photos taken of their venues. When you go to look at the venue information, you can actually see what the venue looks like and get a sense of what it's going to be like to be there. So yeah, very nice application for the site.
All right.
So, yes, and without further ado, that brings us to our main event. So I'm going to turn it back over to Carl, our manager, who'll be...
Thank you very much, Jason and Joyce. Well, I hope some of that might be inspirational, and I hope you might be able to benefit and apply some of those things to your own websites. So, here's what we're going to talk about, the main event. We're referring to the web of web forms. It's, as I said before, it's one of the most highly requested topics that you've asked for. And we're here to talk about some of the new features that you may be able to use to improve web forms. We're going to talk about tips for optimizing the forms and best practices and how to avoid security problems, which are real. Now, I do want to warn you that this is an advanced overview. There's no way that you're going to be able to take all the information you're going to hear today and suddenly start building your web forms without having had some prior experience with building of web forms. But not to worry. I want to point out that This is going to be an in-depth presentation, but that it's going to lead to the creation of some workshops, so that if we do whet your appetite today and you are interested in building more advanced web forms, we will be offering workshops to help get you going. So take some notes. If you have questions, we're going to try to answer a few of them at the end of this presentation. But keep in mind that if you do have really interesting questions that don't get answered today, there are other opportunities. Not only the workshops that we're talking about, but keep in mind that there's also a drop-in lab that is run by the ICS trainers. And so, we're going to get right into it. Get your mobile phones ready, there will be a quiz. Leanne?
Thank you, Carl, for that rousing introduction. Now, just going to have a fair bit of business here. Now, if that hasn't gotten you into the spirit of today's presentation, I'm hoping our title card will. So, I didn't just put that there to satisfy my inner fangirl. I just want to let you know that the ponies are going to be our spirit guides, so to speak, through the world of web forms today. And yeah, so if you're a My Little Pony fan, this is definitely your day. Now, first off, I'd like to thank everyone who responded to our web form survey. And here are the results by order of your preference. So the first one is formatting your web forms, followed by conditionals, then web form security, then submissions and other settings, and finally, wizards with web forms. Like ponies, web forms are very powerful, and as you can see from this list of topics, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so we have to keep things moving at a gallop. So we're just going to mix things up a little bit so that each topic nicely segues into the next. Now, as Carla mentioned, if you have minimal experience with web forms, I can't promise that you're going to be an expert at the end of this presentation, but hopefully you'll get a taste of what is possible, and then afterwards, you can let us know what topics you'd like to have more in-depth information on. So we're off. So first off is formatting your web forms. Now, there are actually 3 components that can help you make your web forms smaller, sleeker, and more attractive to users. And the first one is the matrix. Now, the matrix lets you display multiple components in columns. I don't know if you can see my cursor here. Yeah, so these are the columns. And these subcomponents can include text fields, select options, labels, dates, and text areas. Now, what you see here on the right is an example of a form that can be used to create a catalog of My Little Pony collectibles. So you have 3 columns for character name, as you can see here, condition of the collectible, followed by the number. Now, on the 4th column, you also have options to remove a row. And finally, at the bottom, another button that says, but I have more ponies. So this is just in case you have more than 6 and you just want to keep on adding to your collection. So this is what the admin for the matrix component looks like. So it doesn't look like much of your usual components because the first thing that you actually see are options for adding the rows and columns. And the thing to pay attention to here is the column setting, because the columns determine the number of elements or subcomponents that will appear in your matrix. So from what you can see here, you have element 1, or the first subcomponent, which is a select option for the character, followed by another select option for the condition, and then finally, a text field for the number. Now, as you can see, depending on the kind of subcomponent or element you're using, you're going to get different sets of fields. You can also see, if you scroll down that admin screen, you can also see options for buttons that would enable users to add new rows and delete rows as well. So because the matrix has its own built-in set of components, subcomponents, sometimes it can be difficult to modify. For instance, you can't always change the order successfully, and they don't always work as well as they should. And it can be sometimes glitchy with the date component and the add row and remove row functions. And it's interesting because all of these components are actually just a single component. So the submission data that's contained in the web form, if you download it, you'll see that it's actually all contained in a single cell. So if you can see here, so you've got the different characters listed here, Twilight Sparkle, Applejack, but they're all displayed in a single row. So that means that it's going to be very difficult to parse that data, and you can't probably use that in your subcomponents, or you can't reference them in your emails or your conditionals. So I'm not saying don't use it, but definitely be aware that you should use it with some caution and an awareness of its limitations. So the next step, we're going to talk about the advanced grid. Now, chances are if you've used a grid in your web form, you probably used it to create a survey, kind of like the web form presentation topics survey that some of you have responded to. Now, but what you may not be aware is that you could use the grid component to display other components in rows. So, and it works with any component too, and what it basically does is display any common options as column headings, what you see here at the top, and any field labels are going to be displayed in the first column. So that's super useful because you can basically combine different fields with the same options. So here's an example of a form that lets you customize your own My Little Pony by letting you choose different colors for the mane, the tail, body, and eyes. So the mane and tail are represented here at the top as a grid component, while the body and eyes are two different select options. So all of these fields have the same color options, as you can see: white, yellow, light blue, fuchsia, and purple. And now the only difference is that for the eyes, you've only got 3 options. You don't have white or yellow because basically if you specify that for your pony's eyes, your pony's gonna look like a zombie. So we don't want that. And if you go into the admin, this is what it's gonna look like. So as I mentioned, a grid followed by 2 select options. But what if you start nesting the select options under that grid? All right, so basically you're just gonna drag it underneath. And this is what your form is gonna look like. Ta-da! So all the components are now neatly displayed in rows, and the options appear in columns with the radio buttons displayed accordingly. Where there are no options that are applicable, such as white and yellow for the eyes, the radio buttons just don't appear. So I think that's pretty sweet. So just to show you again what it looks like with or without advanced grid, here's a comparison, right? Now, because you can nest any component into a grid, you can also use it to format complex forms into a single table. So no more excessive scrolling for you users. So here's a closer look at the entire form. You can see all kinds of components, not just select options, but markup, text fields, email, and even field sets. And here's what it looks like in the admin. So you can see at the top, there's the grid, and all the other components are just sitting right underneath it. So you can use grids to create compact, better aligned forms because, as I said, they work with any component, but maybe not page breaks. You're certainly welcome to try. I know I haven't, but you can let me know how that turns out. The other thing is that the information from these components can still be referenced when you set up your emails and conditionals, and all the data is displayed correctly in Excel. However, keep in mind that any hidden fields, if you choose to use a hidden field in your advanced grid, that's okay, but just note that they're still going to be displayed as empty rows. So what you're actually seeing here, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Okay, at the bottom, that's not actually padding. That's actually a hidden component, so it's still displaying a bit. The other thing that you need to watch out for is because it's displayed as a table, it basically retains its width. And it doesn't matter if you have other components on that page, whether you have a vertical menu or a sidebar. So if you're going to use this, make sure that your grid stands alone. There's no other elements on the page, just so there's no overlapping occurring. Now, finally, select options and columns. Now, if you've been working with web forms relatively recently, you would have noticed by now that if you don't set your select options to display as a list box, they are going to be displayed as adaptive columns. And this works for checkboxes, radio buttons, and even limited select options. Now, this is a really cool way of breaking up long forms by adding visual interest. And you don't even need to think about it because it's adaptive, which means that the number of columns changes depending on whether you have menus or sidebars or not. So the first example here at the top, you're getting 3 columns because there's no other elements on the page, and then followed by an example, 2 columns, because you have a vertical menu on the side, and then finally an example of a 1-column set of select options because you have both the vertical menu and the sidebar block. So it works really well. It even works with grids and field sets, but not so much with long labels because, well, anyway, you should avoid using long labels with your select options anyway. So finally, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Joyce Peralta for our first poll. So take it away, Joyce.
Okay, thanks, Leanne. So we thought we'd add these polls in this part of the presentation to break it up because, as Carl and Leanne have mentioned, there's a lot of information to absorb, and we want to make sure that you're picking it up. So we're going to do a poll. If you haven't used the polling software before, this is the software that's used in the classrooms when the lecturers do a poll. So you go to mcgill.ca on your mobile device, mcgill.ca/polling. And if you haven't yet registered, you'll need to register an ID or register an account in order to be able to participate, but hopefully you've participated already or you've registered already. So go to mcgill.ca/polling. The session ID is pro tips. And we're going to open the polling now for people to participate. The first question is a toughie, so I'll put our thinking caps on. Which component is affected by the presence of vertical menus and sidebar blocks? Is it A, the matrix, B, the advanced grid, C, select options, or D, pony saddles? So enter your answers in and give you a few seconds. Okay, we'll close the polling in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and see how you did. All right. So 18% said the matrix, 46% said the advanced grid, 28% said the select options, and 8% said pony saddles. There's some jokers in the audience. So the answer is actually advanced grid. So good work to those people that answered correctly. I'm going to turn it back over to Leanne right now to continue on. We're about a third of the way through the presentation. Thanks, Leanne.
Okay, so actually, while an advanced grid actually is a table, so it's actually just going to stay the same width no matter what you do. So that's why we would advise that you don't place it on a page that has vertical menus and sidebar blocks. So what responds to the presence of vertical menus and sidebar blocks is the select options, just so you know. All right, now we're going to take a little side trip to the 1990s with Wizards with Web Forms. Now, it's actually a bit surprising because when we did the web form survey, we found out that it was the least popular of our topics and that most folks really aren't aware, I believe, that wizards can be used to do a lot of things like simplify complex tasks, direct users to content, and even create short fun quizzes like the one I'm going to show you today. Now, here's an example of a very short which character are you type quiz that helps people find and connect with their inner pony. So let's get started. So who's your pony? the first question is, what kind of pony are you? Are you Earth pony? Are you Pegasus pony? Or are you a unicorn? So for today's example, let's say we selected Pegasus, and then let's click on the next button. So we're presented with the second set of questions. So having chosen Pegasus pony, what Pegasus pony qualities do you possess? Are you loyal, competitive, or brash? Or are you nervous, shy, and empathetic? So let's choose loyal, competitive, and brash. Click on the next button, and voila. You're Rainbow Dash, and she is so fierce, and I know that a lot of you are going to relate to her. All right, just drink it in, just absorb that. So, but what if instead of like finding and connecting with your own inner pony, what your visitors really need to do is be guided through a complex multi-step process, maybe like figuring out a piece of complex software, or what if they need to find content on a large site with multiple levels of navigation, and you've got audience-specific sections that you actually can direct them to from your main menu at the top. So there is a solution for that, fortunately. So this can all be done just by asking your users to answer a series of questions, marking their progress, and showing results based on their answers. In other words, by building a wizard. Now, if you break it down, really, a wizard is just a form with questions, next and previous buttons, a progress bar, and results. So you've got the progress bar there, you've got the question here, and you've got the next and previous buttons. Now, going into the admin, you'll see that the questions are provided by select options here and here, and the sections are created by using page breaks, which are here and here, and the results are displayed by using the markup. Now, the markup was responsible for showing that bit of text and that image of Rainbow Dash at the end of our wizard. Now, one thing you might notice, just looking at this admin, is that there's a heck of a lot more going on here than what you actually experienced on the actual form. I mean, where are all the other questions, and where are all the other kinds of ponies? I mean, where's Applejack, where's Rarity, where are all these guys, you know? But how come we didn't see all these other results? Okay, so one answer. Because conditionals. Now, in a wizard, the answers to the different questions are evaluated with the use of conditionals. And what you see, if you can, as you realize that I've highlighted here, is the actual decision stream that we took that led to the result of Rainbow Dash. Now, if your users chose a different decision stream, then definitely it will lead to a different result. So, because you know that we're going to have a poll, we're going to have a quiz, so I'm just going to help you along by reviewing a few things. So, a wizard is typically an anonymous web form with questions that are provided by select options, and the answers to these questions are evaluated by conditionals. Now, there are next and previous buttons, which lead to different sections or steps which are created using page breaks. And you also have a progress bar where progress can be indicated by page numbers, page labels, or percentage completed. And of course, you also have results. And the results are provided using the markup component. Now that you know what you can accomplish using a wizard, you might actually want to try and go out and start building them. But before you do, you should remember that it's probably best to keep your wizards anonymous, okay? Because later on in this presentation, we're going to be urging you guys to authenticate your forms. We're going to stress that repeatedly. But in this case, we're going to say it's okay to keep your wizards anonymous because you're just going to be asking, you're not going to be asking your users to provide confidential details. You're just going to be asking them to answer simple questions, which brings us to our second point. Use simple questions. Now, another thing you need to realize when you're building your wizard is that Confirmation pages really aren't that useful. So this is an option that you can uncheck later in your form settings. And because you no longer have a confirmation page, but you still have a submit button. So that's not really going to be useful. So another thing that you might want to do is you want to modify your submit button and change the text to something like reset or start over. So it just makes it look like your wizard is going to reset itself. Now, we're going to segue now into conditionals. Now, having looked at wizards, you probably have some idea now of how conditionals work and how they're basically used to hide or show components based on the value of other components. But now that we know what a conditional can do, as we've amply shown, let's try and find out how it does it. So let's start by breaking it down into two main parts. The if statement, which for our purposes here today, we're going to call the condition. And the second part, the then statement, which we're going to call the consequence. Now, mind you, like I said, these are not official or technical terms. They're just going to roll off the tongue better than saying if statements and then statements repeatedly as we describe what's happening. Now, there's a wide variety of combinations of conditions and consequences possible. They can go anywhere from very simple conditional statements like if X, then A. Can't get any simpler than that, to conditional statements that are a lot more complex. So building on if X, then A, slightly more complex, you've got if X or Y, then B. And then you've also got if X and Y, then C. Now, what you see here, the or and the and, or they're what we call operators. Now, an interesting thing that I'd like to show you about the second example is that it actually has what we call a nested condition. And you can create a nested condition by clicking here on this plus button that's between parentheses. And these nested conditions actually come into their own once you start to get more and more, think of more and more complex conditional statements. Now, here's one such example. Now, in the first one, you can see here a nested condition with an AND operator followed by a single consequence. So you actually have 1, 2, 3 conditions there. And another example is the second one here. If X and Z, then A, then B. So you have 2 conditions here, 1, 2, followed by 2 consequences. Now, what I've shown you here today, I could go on and on about all the different kinds of conditional statements that are possible, and there is such a huge variety, and we won't be able to discuss them all here today. But I just wanted to show you what was possible, and I want to let you know that really the kind of conditional statements that you make ultimately depend on the complexity of your form and the possible outcomes that you want to present to your users. And really, the only way to really learn conditionals is to just go out there and start building your own web forms. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. We all make them. But you need to be able to put yourself in the right frame of mind. This works for conditionals. This works in general, for doing anything when you're building a web form. So, because it's just so easy to get lost in the minutia of web form administration, I would suggest really that you take a step or two back and just think about it in different terms. So, one way to do that is to start thinking of your form as a river. It meanders along slowly but surely, flowing in one direction. Now, what you're going to see is the first fork in your river. And this is actually the first question. Now, the first question is the point at which the river begins to fork into different streams. You can see that there are 3 streams here. Now, the number of streams actually depends on how many options are possible. So, previously we had 3 options, Earth, Pegasus, and Unicorn, so we have 3 streams. And the streams themselves will fork into smaller streams, once again, depending on how many options there are, and so on and so forth, until finally the user reaches a result. And like I said, you probably guessed that this is our previous wizard in Pony River form. And I would like to emphasize one thing. It flows in one direction, and notice that only one stream leads to a particular outcome. Please bear that in mind when you're using conditionals. So here's what the form looks like again in the admin view when you click on the Conditionals tab. Now, I showed you that Pony River, not just because of some weird inner fangirl fixation, but what I really want you to do is to absorb the idea that you need to plan your forms beforehand. You need to figure out where all the forks and all the possible outcomes in your form are going to be coming from. So to do that, you don't need any fancy flowcharting software. You just need to draw out your decision streams as I showed you previously. And it helps even when you've already built your form and you're running into problems making your conditionals work. Just take a step or two back, draw it out on paper. I guarantee it's going to help. Now, the other thing, keep it simple. Actually, the less conditionals that you use, the better. It's better for form processing speed, and it's better for your user's experience. And also, if you have a lot of fields, another way to keep things simple is to use either field sets or even page breaks to group components. And this will enable you to separate fields that are not going to be affected by conditions. And you can also easily hide or show consequence fields that way. And finally, as I've repeated before, only one stream can lead to a particular outcome. This means that if you have two conditional statements that lead to the same consequence, you're going to get an error. Okay? So that's probably the most common error that people are going to encounter. Now, time for our pop quiz. So over to you, Joyce.
Okay, so back to mcgill.ca/polling for the next quiz. I don't know if you remember when Leanne went through the survey results at the beginning, the wizards were actually at the bottom. They were one of the least things that people wanted to find out about. And that kind of surprised us because it's something that we often get requests for when we work with people. One of the examples was the Skills 21 site. So they have a bunch of different workshops and they wanted to be able to take their potential participants through a questionnaire that allowed them to identify what their career goals were, what types of things they were interested in, and then at the end show them what workshops would work for them based on the responses that they gave. And I think there's a lot of applications, potential applications for that here at McGill. So just something to keep in mind. So this question's a little bit easier. So the question is, what is used to evaluate answers in wizards? And the four options are A, progress bar, B, conditionals, C, questions, and D, horns made of pure silver. So enter your answers in now. I'll try and get it right this time. And we will close the polling in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's see how we did. Great, okay. So 8% said progress bar, 83% said conditional, so everybody was listening that time around. Questions got a 6% answer, and 2% said horns made of pure silver. Thank you. Thanks, Leanne.
All right. Okay, I'm very glad to see that we're getting a lot of that everyone's paying attention, and we haven't lost too many people yet, so we're going to move on to submissions and other settings. Now, let's say you've planned your form, you've built it, now you're ready to release it into the wild like a beautiful pony. Just let it run free. So, but, you know, try to resist that temptation for a little while, and don't forget that there are still some settings that you would do best to verify before you let your web forms run free. Now, one thing that you should always try to do is verify if the right people are able to access your form. And one way to do that is to use submission access. So yes, you can check submission access settings to specify whether your form can be accessed by anonymous or authenticated users. And this is the part where we start saying it's always best to authenticate. Just save yourself the trouble. Just authenticate your forms. Now, but if you really, really have to have a form that's anonymous, just make sure that when you set your forms to anonymous, make sure that the authenticated user option is also checked. Because otherwise what's going to happen is that there's, if you have other people who are already logged in, then the form is set to anonymous. It's actually going to force them to log out before they can access the form. So another thing that you should be aware of is that you can actually specify how many submissions are possible for your form, both for the form in general as well as per user. So, for instance, the form that you filled out to attend today's session actually has a limit of 150 because that's how many chairs we have today. And just be aware, there's also another way to manage submissions, and that's by using the limited select option component. Now, I'm not sure if many people use that. We've certainly used that in the convocation side. And that was actually developed for them. I'm not going to go into it too much, but there's a KB article about it, and it's pretty awesome, so I suggest that you check it out. What it basically does is that it's just the regular select options, but it lets you specify how many times a user can make a specific choice. Now, another thing that you can set is the per user submission limit. And this comes really into play once you start working with anonymous web forms. So more on that later. So moving on to your email settings. Well, most of us, myself included, will have probably left your email template as shown here at the top, with all of the submission values included. Now, if you see this token right there, it says submission values. That's basically what this token does. This means that all of the data from all of the components that are checked under the included email values will be included. Now, because we're going to tell you that you should avoid transmitting confidential information from your submissions via email, you can do two things to guard against that. The first thing is to just remove this token that you see over here and then just use individual submission tokens. And you can find out what tokens you can use by going to this link here, Browse Available Tokens. Another way, possibly a simpler way of doing that, is unchecking this option that says include all components. Okay, if you uncheck that and you start also unchecking all the components that would probably contain confidential information from your users, then that should make you set. Now, I don't know if most of you realize that it's also possible to specify different email submission recipients based on how users respond to questions on your form. In this example, as you can see here on the right, someone who answered the question, what kind of pony are you? And if they answered Earth Pony, their submission would be sent to earth.pony@mylittlepony.com. If they answered Pegasus, they would be sent to pegasus.pony@mylittlepony.com, and so on and so forth. Now, this just means that you can use component values to specify your email settings and that a unique email address can be assigned per option or key value pair. Now, if you are going to use this feature, I would really suggest that if you have to modify your component, the component that you're using to reference your emails with, please double check your email settings afterwards, because it's possible that the email addresses might be lost. And that depends on what kind of, what changes you're going to make to your component. Another thing is that if you have a lot of options, if you have key value pairs that are like da-da-da-da-da, just like that, it's always best to list them alphabetically. It's just better to manage them that way. And one way to do that is just keep an Excel spreadsheet of it, and then just copy and paste those key value pairs into your select options settings. And now last, but certainly not the least, let's talk about web form security. Now, I mentioned anonymous forms earlier, and if you must absolutely use an anonymous web form on your site, please remember that you can still protect your form from spam by setting the per-user submission limit in the form settings. Now, be aware that there's already a measure in place that protects all of your web forms by blocking repeat submissions, limiting them to one submission per IP address per every 6 seconds. But if that's not secure enough for you, you can increase that limit to the options that you see right here. Another way, and this is very important, if you're going to have an anonymous web form, please do not use file upload fields. Okay, that just makes you so vulnerable. Anyone can upload anything onto your site, We have protections in place, but please don't give them that open door, and then spammers or bots are just going to walk right in. Another way to protect your form is to make sure that it is not possible for them to enter email addresses. And also, if you also provide other fields that it's possible for people to enter email addresses, what's going to happen is that if your form in particular is set to send a confirmation email to whatever email address is filled in there, well, that's just a recipe for lots and lots of spam. So, if you've been working with forms lately, and this does not just have to do with anonymous forms, but also with authenticated forms, you will have probably seen this notice here at the top with a link to the McGill policies regarding confidential information. Now, what it basically says, that link, is advising you that you should probably not collect credentials and confidential information on your email. And that's listed here as usernames, access codes, account numbers, passwords, PINs, tokens, or other authentication. Now, another thing, since we're saying don't send confidential information via email, this is the sort of stuff, all listed here, all the elements of a student's record are confidential. So that's the kind of information you shouldn't be passing around via email, not just through web forms, but in emails in general. Finally, no ifs and buts about it. The following details should never be collected via a web form. SIN numbers, credit card numbers, debit card numbers. Any forms containing these three fields are going to be so problematic. We want to let you know that if you require any kind of payment information from your users, then probably a web form is not the solution for you. It's always best to explore an e-commerce solution that is supported by McGill. And also, as he said, whenever possible, ask your users to sign in. And if you need to share submission information, please do not use email for this purpose. It's always better to ask anyone, any of your stakeholders who need to review submission information. Instead of sending them emails with that information, just ask for them to be granted access to your site. That way, they can just log in and view the submission information right on the form itself. It's just a lot much safer that way. Another thing that we'd like to say is that once you've created your forms, you do have to maintain them. You have to keep them up to date. And one thing that you probably need to do as best practice is to routinely download your web form submissions. That way, should anything happen to your form, you still got your submissions. You've still got your data from your users. And if you have, if your forms have served their purpose and you're done with them, please do unpublish or delete them because they're no longer needed, okay? And the other thing that you need to do is, if you have to update your forms, make changes to them, it's always good practice to close your form to submissions before you make any changes. That way, you avoid the possibility of a user filling out your form, and then all of a sudden their session is going to be cut short, and then they're going to lose all their information because you just happened to save right at the moment when they're entering information. So if you close your form to submissions, you are going to see a notice at the top that, of course, says close to submissions, right? But it's always a good idea to add some additional information there. And we always suggest that you add a temporary block explaining to your users when they should be able to expect your form to go back online, just to let them know that they haven't completely missed the boat. All right? So, we've reached, thank you for staying with us this far. We've reached the end of our presentation, and we're going to move on to our polling. But before we do, I'd like to say thanks to the artists that you see listed here, because without their wonderful work, our presentation wouldn't look half as good. So if you want more My Little Pony goodness, just visit all these pages. Definitely get your fix, you know. And one thing that I'd like to point out, that most of the features that we have talked about here today are actually the work of the Drupal open source community, of which the Web Services Group is a proud part. And because you are our users, you let us know what you think of the WMS, you give us feedback, you let us know what you expect, and you tell us how you work with it. You may not know this, but big surprise, you're also a part of that open source community, so that's a big thank you to you as well. And I'm going to sneak in a little bit here, and I'm going to say that just because someone isn't up here on stage with us doesn't mean that they're any less a vital part of this presentation. So I'm going to do a big shout out to Ms. Layardley, who made this presentation possible today. So big thanks to Layard for all of her great work. So now, over to you, Joyce. Take it away.
And thank you, Leanne, for that presentation. I think we like to consider ourselves expert users with the WMS, and I learned a lot from Leanne's presentation. There's so much to know about the WMS, and there's a lot of minutia there. So thanks again, Leanne, for taking us through that. So we're going to close off with one more polling item. The address again is mcgill.ca/polling. And the question is, what must you never do in a web form? And this is a big message we want to drive home. So our options are A, transmit confidential information via email. B, collect SIN, credit card, and debit card numbers. C, include file upload fields in anonymous forms. And D, all of the above. So enter your responses in now, and we'll close the polling in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see what we've got.
Huzzah.
Terrific. Yeah. So that is the correct response. 98% said all of the above. So it's great to see that everybody paid such close attention to the presentation today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Carl to give us, to take us into the final stretch. Carl?
Well, thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Leanne, for that presentation. I did warn you that it was going to be a deep dive into web forms. I didn't warn you that it would also take you by way of little ponies. But maybe you learned something there too. So just to do a quick wrap up, the main reason we are doing these presentations is to, well, bring information to the community, share information, share tips, and really raise awareness about what is possible. And so we do appreciate you coming out, especially on cool mornings like this. As I mentioned before, we do have tools that we distribute. We do have articles and communications that we are sending out that will point you in the right direction. Look out for the WMS Digest. It'll be in your mailboxes on a fairly regular basis. Our schedule is about once a month. And we expect that a lot more people are going to be able to profit from this. One advantage of it is that it might eliminate some of the extra emails that would have been filling up your inboxes. We try to compile a lot of information in a regular digest so that you can click through and then read information on the website. And the information on the website is persistent, so you might even lose an email or delete it, but you can always go back to the website and see what we're talking about. And the website that I'm referring to will largely be our own WMS website. So /WMS on the McGill platform. You'll see that we've got quite a number of articles that have been published. And the purpose of these articles is, again, to share ideas, share tips, sometimes do shout-outs to particular site administrators who are doing a really good job or who are doing some interesting work we think you might be able to become inspired by. But check them out. There's a lot of information in the articles. And there are a few other resources. One of the things that we would like to direct your attention to is that after this event, like after all of our events, we like to take a survey. We like to find out what you thought of the presentation materials, because not only our tool set goes through continuous improvement, but we like to apply the same process to our presentations. So suggestions, ideas, even upcoming topics for the next presentation. Please fill in that form. Again, a link to the article section of our website, and a resource that I think many of you do take advantage of, but I'll highlight it again. In addition to the original training that you get through the ICS, through IT trainers, there are also drop-in labs. So if you're experiencing issues or you need an answer to a question or you just need somebody to help guide you through the creation of a certain web page or formatting, do use the drop-in lab, because not only will there be qualified trainers on hand, but very often, as much as we can get there, there's a representative from our group that can help you solve some common problems. And with that, we come to the end of our presentation. We do have some time for a few questions. So I'd open up the floor to people with questions, and if you do have questions, could you please use the microphone?
Is it on?
No.
Hi, I'm Lisanne from the Faculty of Law. My question pertains to the activation of the search feature for events. Does that also apply to announcements? No,
Sorry,
it doesn't.
could you repeat the question?
So Jason said that we could activate a search feature for past events, which
Right,
I'm
so
very grateful for, but I also wondered if this applied to announcements.
Yeah, so the calendar event search that is currently on Music and a few of the other sites that we showed only pulls in local event channels items.
Okay, not, okay. Okay, I'll probably email you with another question
Sure.
later.
Okay.
I'll let the mic
Great, thanks for the question.
Hello, I'm in the Faculty Development Office. I have had some interesting issues cloning web forms where I find that the original document ends up being written over by the new information that you try to include in the clone. Do you have any advice for me on how to avoid that in the future?
Sorry, so what happens when you try to clone a web form?
When I clone a web form, it gives me the new form, and then you can go in and make changes.
Of course, yes.
But it writes over my original form.
Oh my goodness. Sounds like a ticket. Yes. So I guess one of the things that we also want to let you know today is that if you indeed are encountering issues like that, if your web forms are misbehaving or any feature of the WMS is misbehaving or not functioning as expected, please do let us know by notifying the IT service desk, and then we will definitely be looking into it. So that's something that we'll definitely be verifying for you.
Oh, thank you very much.
And if that does happen, just be sure to maintain like the original one so that we can just like investigate with both of those files.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank
Yeah, that's
you.
very unexpected. Thanks.
Hello, friends.
Hello.
I'm Val McLeod with the Digital Communications team, and my question is with regard to the dashboard users. I know in our situation, like obviously we have work study students that come and go and have permissions at some points. So when we go into the users, we can see who has had permission historically. Is there a way to differentiate between who currently has permissions and who doesn't? Because obviously when people leave, we submit our form to remove permissions. And when we go into the user dashboard, if they're still there, it's hard to know whether or not they still have access. So would there be a way to
Right.
differentiate
Yeah,
between
good
those?
question. I think the best way to go about that is to choose the role, so filter to the role that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you can sort by most recently active.
Okay, but I can't actually tell who is currently active and who currently still has permissions and who doesn't, right? I can
No.
see historically who has had permissions and
Right.
at certain levels, but I can't kind of filter who's currently allowed in and who isn't, for the moment. Okay.
No, you can't.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to mention that is a really good point. A lot of people, when they see the list of site managers or the people in those lists, maybe not site managers, they might have other roles, and they worry that they might still have access to the website. So there are two things here. First, if they are no longer at McGill, they will not have access to your website. The name appears because they have historically had access, or they might be the author of some content in the website. But as you're scanning that list, and it's a really good practice to scan that list, if there is someone there who's still working at McGill who's listed, they may have access to your website.
Right, and that's why I'm thinking of the work study students, because often, I mean,
Exactly.
for some units, I know we often have people come in for a semester, and then they're gone, but they're still active students, so.
Right. This is partly due to the way we get information into the system. So it comes out from the banner people tables. So there isn't an elegant way of flagging people who move from department to department.
Okay.
So do check your dashboard and let us know. It's just a ticket that goes to the service desk. Please remove this individual's access from my website.
Okay, perfect.
Okay?
Thanks.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there any other questions? Well, I guess you have a lot to think about in terms of web forms, so I won't stress you out any further. But thank you very much for coming out today.
Thanks.